Welcome to the Gateway, broadcasting live from the edge of the Mojave where the strange slips through the cracks. We are live on United Public Radio Network 107.7 FM. I'm your host this evening, C.L. Thomas. I have a great guest tonight, and our topic is paranormal experiences that lead into profound spiritual awakenings. And I am willing to bet many of you out there probably had just that happen to you. So we'll get into that in just a minute, but first, a quick check-in here at the station. You've been listening to Sean Kelly with Into the Night right here on United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM. Stay tuned because after my show tonight is Paranormal Heart Podcast with Eric and Justin. Author Ryan Kralik will discuss his book, It From Us, an information-first framework and purpose of consciousness. It sounds like a really exciting show, actually. It's cold around the U.S. right now, so cozy up and keep that radio dial tuned in. It's currently 53 degrees here in the valley, and okay, so it's not that cold here in Vegas, but it kind of feels like it is to us. All I can say is I just can't believe the weather right now. I've been following some of my friends back in Nash Vegas. I lived there for 16 years, and I've never seen an ice storm that they've gotten over the last few days. And it's incredible. So all the trees are covered in several inches of ice, and they're just kind of hanging over, and they're snapping like twigs. A couple friends got this on video and showed it to me. And this is day 2. They still don't have any power because those trees, as they're falling, they're taking all of the electrical lines with them. So it's kind of a bad situation. So back to our subject tonight. Throughout history, people like Whitney Strieber, Chris Bledsoe, Edgar Casey, you all probably know somebody in your personal life, Joan of Arc. They all report paranormal experiences like visions, entities. They see them, they'll hear voices, they'll have dreams. And these events shattered their understanding of reality to a degree that what followed, it starts out as fears, confusion for most, but then it's quickly followed by a spiritual awakening that changes their lives. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Tonight, we're going to explore paranormal activity and spiritual awakening and how they intersect, where encounters with the unexplained ignite intuition and transforms lives. Joining us is Carolann, Ladarola, I hope I said her name right, a lifelong explorer of high-strangeness, and she's also a light worker. She has a show right here on United Public Radio. It's Ethereal Encounters Unveiled. She brings together voices from the paranormal world, like authors, ufologists, psychics, experiencers, inviting us beyond the veil to question reality and discover what lies unseen. And I tell you what, her show is really good. I went and saw it. She's got a lot of followers on her show. I'm really excited that she's coming on mine. Let me get her on here. Carolann, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a blessing.
Remind me again where you're at in the world.
Yeah. You mean on Earth or?
Yes, on Earth. Yeah, I guess we have to specify that, don't we?
Yeah, we do, because I live in Pennsylvania currently. I'm from New York, as you can tell. I still have a hangover accent, but I've been here for like 40 years. So, but I've worked in New York most of my life, telecommuting, and we had a bitch of a snowstorm too. We had over 2 feet. Thank God, no ice, and our lights did stay on. So I'm blessed. Because it was bad. And now it's all, it's all ice now. It's brutal out there. It's probably 8 degrees with a nasty wind chill of God knows what. So everybody's getting slammed.
It's just awful. The Northeast, they're used to that sort of thing to a degree, though, aren't they? Like they have the snowmobiles and all the salt containers, whatever it is, they spread all over the roads up there.
Yeah, they're very prepared.
Yeah,
we're very prepared. Literally the next day, the roads were pretty clear, although still nasty. But this winter has been particularly brutal. as far as I can remember back. We've kind of been getting spoiled with the weather, so I'm so worried about the folks like in other states because I know they're without power, and my thoughts and prayers go out to them because I know what that's like. It sucks, but
Yeah, it does. It does. So, to get us started on our topic, we got a big topic tonight, and I'm really excited to dive into that. I know a lot of people out there, everyone I talk to in paranormal world, well, not everybody, some people, they start out having these paranormal experiences, myself included. I just read a book about, I think it's called H2D haunting or something. It's a really good. It's written by Tim Shaw, and it's about a case that happened in the Pennsylvania area, or is it New York area? I think it was New York area, in a university. And this kid had a series of events happen to him. His roommate did too, and it kind of steered the course of his life a little bit. You hear it again and again, though, and I kind of feel like, in a way, the paranormal will do this just to grab your attention, and then they're like, "Oh, well, look over here now and see this. Maybe this is the direction you should look at going into." So I don't know. What have you heard out there about this topic?
First, I just want to say hello to some of the folks chat. I know them very well. Mort, Heidi, my star-stalker, hello. Kevin, always a blessing to see you. Sherry, I just love to say hello to them. Yeah, I agree. There's been, and I've noticed it more since the pandemic. There's been like an upsurge of people being more open and vocal about things that they're experiencing, whether or not it is because we were home and not so distracted with the everyday comings and goings of life, and people were just tapping into like the spiritual realm. Maybe they were meditating more, or just coming to grips with their own reality at that point, thinking about life just in general and how easily it comes and goes. And folks know, and I've talked about this quite a lot on my channel, I lost my husband during year one of the pandemic. And
sorry to hear that.
Thank you so much. And that was quite devastating, and still is for me. I met him when I was like 18. We were married. It would have been like 45 years at the time. I have no problems talking about my age. It just is what it is, right? But, about it.
People should be so lucky, though. Some people don't live this long.
This is true.
We were just talking about this before the show.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, look at, there's so many folks in their 20s and 30s that have passed in the recent years. That's absolute. Thank you so much, Joni, and everybody in the chat. Yeah, it's, and I mention it because things like grief, or divorce, or even moving, can be very taxing on the spirit and on the soul. Any event that is stressful in our lives can trigger, the paranormal, and like the veil seems to get thinner, I think, and there's more people awakening to these types of things. So, I mean, I've noticed it my whole life because I can remember being 5 and knowing that there was something different about me when I looked at the world and other people. And then later in life, I found out, hey, I'm an empath, and that's okay. But it wasn't anything we talked about. It was always something you never discussed. So I had to go many, many years of my life without really being able to communicate it with anybody except my husband, really. And when you have an event like that, something catastrophic in your life, something very stressful, it does breach into a different realm of your essence. It really does. And even though I've experienced, high strangeness my whole life, when my husband passed, it was a really like a tapping in point for me. I hope that makes sense.
It does. It makes total sense. It's interesting that you mentioned the whole COVID times. I call it the dark times.
Yeah, the
Because
dark.
what you saw from that is people they were all of a sudden, everybody was at home. They were tapping into, there's all kinds of different, there was meditational groups going on online. There was a lot of like metaphysical shops that were selling gemstones, rocks, and there was classes for that. There was a lot of paranormal classes going on at the time, mediumship development classes, all of that from that period. And now they're still going strong, but they're kind of, it's a little different now, of course. Hillbilly Herb. I
always love that.
Hi, Heidi. Hillbilly Herb.
Yeah.
Sorry, I digressed there for a minute. But yeah, there was a time where the metaphysical shops were doing really well during that time too. Everybody was kind of searching, it seemed like. But
God. You know, go ahead.
In your life, was there like a single paranormal experience that happened that kind of steered you toward being a light worker? I saw that in your bio, and I kind of wanted to ask about that.
Yeah, thank you. If I can think back to one particular event that happened to me, it definitely was this one. I've had things before this, but nothing as profound where decades later it still impacts me. So I was about 15 and I was reading a book called Cosmic Consciousness by Buck. And I've always been into reading, metaphysical books and high-strangeness books and things, and always on the QT, because people back then would think you're a little cuckoo,
Yeah.
saw you with these things. So I'm sitting on the porch reading it, and I'm probably about halfway through the book, and I get to this one paragraph, and I'm a highlighter, so I'm like highlighting things and stuff, and all of a sudden, and I'm going to try to explain it the best way I could, I feel like I left my body and I was taken to some place that, if I could compare it to an NDE, I would, even though it might sound blasphemous to do that. But it was the most magical, beautiful experience. Definitely paranormal in the sense that I was somewhere I didn't recognize. I didn't know what it was, especially back then. I remember feeling euphoric. Like, that's the best word to describe it. And I got this download of information, and it came in so hot and fast that when it was over, I didn't remember it until it started to make sense as the years went by. And I would constantly reread that paragraph thinking that would bring that feeling back again, and it never did. And I tried numerous amounts of times. And that one particular episode that happened to me really transformed the way I saw the world for the rest of my life.
Now, how do you mean that the way you saw the world? Do you mean it kind of opened you up to the spiritual side?
Definitely, because it kind of nailed for me that there was something much more to this life than just our flesh and bone, that there was something out there that was begging me to pursue it. And that kind of put me on the mission to try to do that. And I became an even more avid reader, so much so that I would lock myself in my bedroom, and my mom told my dad, there's something wrong with her, because that's not normal. We need to contact a shrink. So my mother asked my family doctor. I laugh at it now.
Our parents
And
used
he
to
said, she'll come out of it. And I did eventually, I did. But yeah, it made me see that there was something so much greater than what and at 15, that's like a lot to absorb, at that young age. But it did put me in the direction of the rest of my life, which has always been what I consider a light worker, and trying to, share the good information and help people where I could. And that I should have put first, because that was like a primary thing for me, to like help as many people as I could through what I was learning.
So you were 15 and you already, did you know that you were going to do light working? What is that, first of all, for people who might be listening and don't know what that is?
Yeah, that's someone who, it's like a fancy word for someone who wants to spread the light and teach the light and goodness, and put them on a path maybe, or help them walk on a path towards that. And I knew that was my mission. And I didn't know the word at the time, but being an empath, empaths are like a unique group of people, and there's many millions and billions of them out there. And there's a lot of people who are empaths and don't know it. And empaths experience the world without, the best way I could describe it, a thick emotional insulation around them. And this makes them experience subtle shifts in mood, tension, intention, atmosphere. Things are immediately noticeable, even when nothing is happening. That's like the best way to describe it. And empaths often confuse empathy with responsibility. And that was a big one for me, because I felt that it was my responsibility to fix everybody. And it took me a long time to discover that wasn't my job to do, to fix people.
How do you differentiate between having to fix somebody, and how sometimes you have a calling to kind of, like, spirit will call you to go help somebody in particular sometimes. So how do you determine the differences between, okay, spirit told you to go help this person, but I don't, it's not my responsibility to fix them?
Exactly. And that's a great question, because that's a big struggle for folks who are empaths in particular. In the beginning, that was one of my big problems. Like I said, I always thought I had to fix everybody, like it was and then I would get angry if they didn't listen to what I was telling them, because, I was getting from these, and I call them downloads of information, of what I knew a person had to do to get right. And then when they didn't take that advice, it frustrated the heck out of me. And then it took me a long time to realize that that's not my job. That's not my job to fix you. And if I'm guided to tell someone something that I know to be, then I will tell them, because I can differentiate between zipping it and keeping my mouth shut and having to tell someone something. So like there'll be times when I'll meet someone and I'll get something right away from them, and then I just keep it to myself unless I'm directed to say something. Once I'm directed, and like I said, I know the difference, then I will say something. Absolutely.
When you were 15, I want to go back just a little bit.
Yeah.
Was there anyone for you to, when you had this profound experience, was there anyone that you were able to talk to about it, to be able to process what had happened?
No one, just books. That was it. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was crazy.
How did you move forward into tapping into energy as a light worker and figuring out that different frequencies and things with energy could basically heal yourself or heal other people around you?
Well, I had experienced a great amount of anxiety because of it, because I had all of this emotion and feelings and direction, and I didn't know what to do with it. So it made my body experience terrible anxiety attacks, and that was a real pain to deal with. I remember my first anxiety attack, I was 10, because I was feeling all of this. Like, I would be able to walk into a room of people and read every single one of them and couldn't do anything with it. And when you're in a situation like that, your body doesn't know how to process the information, and it turns it into anxiety. So a lot of people that experience anxiety attacks think it's purely psychological or coming from a trauma, and it's not always necessarily that. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Now, you say you're an empath. Are you also a medium?
It's interesting because I get information all the time, like all the time. And like I said, I can meet someone, get information. So if you call that mediumship, to me, it's more like clairvoyancy, but I don't know if I would call it mediumship. I don't know. These words kind of confuse me. There's like a vocabulary of words in this genre. And for me, a lot of them intermingle into one another, so they're not really defined. But I do get things, messages, downloads. And 90% of the time I keep them to myself, because I learned that it's not my responsibility to sell that, to give like I used to do tarot readings when I was to a very small group of people, just a few friends. And at that point I realized that I felt, for me personally, that it wasn't my job to do that and to direct people, because I think it's important for people to have self-discovery. So I don't want to influence someone to go in a direction that maybe, to me, it interferes with free will. Now, I don't have a problem with sharing. Like, say, for instance, if I got a download about you, and say it was really strong, and it was for you, and this is just an example, not to drive to a certain location. Like, I would be compelled to tell you that. And I would say, hey, CL, just not really feeling that it would be safe for you to do. I kind of really package it in a carefully structured way. Because, again, I don't think it's my responsibility to change your course. But I do feel, when I get that very strong, intuitive feeling, that I have to tell you that, and then I do. I will.
Right.
Absolutely.
When you're in a room with a bunch of people like that, how different is that? Is it hard for you to be in a noisy place?
Yeah, really hard. Still, but I've learned how to ground myself now, and that helps a lot. So I envision myself, I use my grounding chakra, and I always, it's funny because my sister is always dragging me to Walmart, and I can't stand going in there. And I use that as an example because it's always crowded. It's always chaotic. And the other night before the storm, she insisted on going in there. It was not good. There was hundreds of people in there. And, I grounded myself, and I envisioned myself in a protective shield, a white light, but I did nothing but complain the whole way. I kept telling her, hurry up, got to get out of here. Can't take it. She was getting really mad. She didn't fully understand where that was coming from. But again, to answer your question, yeah, I have a really difficult time, better now than ever, because I can't control a lot of it. But lots of people do make me crazy. What does Heidi say? Too people-y. She says it's too people-y. And that's true, right, Heidi?
So where I was leading that to, though, is a lot of the listeners here for this show, they're into paranormal investigating. They've all
Yeah.
had paranormal experiences. So if they are empathic in any way, what does that sensitivity to energy, how does that play a role in their experiences with the paranormal?
Yeah, they need to be really careful, especially if they're truly an empath. And like I said, we all have that ability. Some of us just suppress it and they grow up suppressing it and they do a good job of living a life without dealing with it. So, but if you're aware as an empath and when you do a paranormal investigation, you really need to protect yourself more so than the average person would. I think it could become highly dangerous for them. You can unintentionally take an entity home with you, and they will attach to you as an empath if you don't protect yourself, because those are the people that they seek. They really do. Not for really nefarious reasons all the time, but they want help lots of times too, and they will attach. So they need to really do some extra grounding work.
Are you able, or do you help spirits on the other side when you come in contact with them?
I was one of those empaths that the few times that I have, it scared me so much in the beginning that I kind of put up a barrier so I wouldn't attract them. And I got really good at doing that. But there are times when I will sense it, and I don't see them visually, but I absolutely sense them. And I immediately, unless they need help, which rarely happens where I've been signaled, it happened to really once when I went in this old candle shop, actually right in the Pocono area that's known to be very haunted. This doctor used to perform experiments on chimpanzees, I think for the polio vaccine, and he would do all horrible things to animals. And I went in there, and I had a terrible experience. But to answer your question, I avoid those types of situations. I don't think I'm of the right vibration to be able to help them.
Right. That's interesting. What can you tell paranormal people? I just got a question and I'm trying to word it.
Yeah.
They want to know, how can they, when, hold on a second. How can they process having a paranormal experience without losing their grounding, I guess is what they're trying to ask.
As an empath or just in general?
I'm assuming as an empath.
Well, what I always do is my grounding technique. Like, even if I go to a cemetery, I always make sure I ground myself and prepare well in advance before I do that. And what works for me is I make sure my feet are planted on the ground and I meditate, go into a meditation, and then I envision this white protective dome around me connecting to my lower chakra. And I say a few ritual prayers that I personally developed for myself. And then throughout the day, I always envision that and make sure that it's still intact, like that it's still being enforced. So if I were going on any type of paranormal adventure, even if it's a cemetery, anywhere, I would absolutely make sure I ground myself before and after the event. I mean, that's what I would personally do.
Got it. So you're on this course in life now that you discover yourself as a light worker. So how did you start getting into that?
Well, as I said, as an empath, it was very difficult for me because I was always called overly sensitive. by everybody in my family. Everybody called me overly sensitive. So anytime I had an experience and I tried to relate that, both my parents, my siblings would immediately go, "Oh, you're just overly sensitive." And then, you start to believe that, and it's not true. And I think that's really important to know for people that are empaths. Don't believe that. It's not true. We are not overly sensitive. Empaths notice emotional and energetic information more so than others unconsciously. And it's sad when we start to ignore and suppress that. And then when people call us overly sensitive, it can numb the efficiency and the depth of your perception. So don't let those words ever be. I don't know if anybody listening has experienced that, where you're told, you're just sensitive. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
Heidi. And you know what? I've heard that my whole life too.
There you go.
To the point where even I will say, I'll tell somebody, if I start to get, just overwhelmed with stuff, oh, I'm just being oversensitive, because that's what I've been told my whole life.
Right. And that becomes, your mantra, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it's very damaging. It really is a very damaging thing, because I always felt like it was an insult, number one. And number two, it marks you like there's something wrong with you. So you immediately begin to close down, and then you close your abilities down even more. Go ahead.
There's a name for children that are like that. Is it the Crystal Kids? I can't remember the name for them.
Oh,
you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
There's a name for that, and I cannot think of the name of it.
When I met one in the grocery store last year. Star
Child.
Yes,
Star Child. There you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now,
I met one, and you should have seen the two of us. It was unbelievable. It's the first time that I came face to face with a starseed child. And I was shopping in the grocery store with my sister, and the two of us just looked at each other from down the aisle. She came running. I got the chills thinking about it. She came running to me, and we hugged for like 2 minutes. And her mother was like looking at us, and she came over and said, "That doesn't surprise me." And I ended up talking to this kid for 40 minutes. It was phenomenal. It was a great experience.
Wow. Now, when you all those kids have the same problems, that like they can't sit still, they're misdiagnosed with HD. I can't talk.
ADHD, yeah.
They have, it's not that they have learning disabilities, but they just can't sit still. They've already learned that stuff a lot of times. Like they're always like a couple steps above everybody else with reading, writing, all that stuff. So as a kid, they're kind of all jumbled up doing things. Have you been able to kind of help anybody along the way that's like that?
Oh God, yeah. Yeah. One in particular, my daughter is an empath as well. And she's still in the learning, and we go head to head a lot, because again, with her, I am so much more open and vocal. And I sometimes I approach her incorrectly. I just want to grab her and say, "You don't understand, like you need to stop this and do that." But as she got older, she gets it now. But I've been able to help several other. My niece was an empath, or is an empath. So that's been so gratifying, being able to help these people. Absolutely.
What is your advice if somebody out there thinks that they have a kid right now who they believe might be a starseed?
Well, the woman in the grocery store, she knew her daughter was a starseed. So that child was very blessed, because you can tell that child had no repression put upon it. She was allowed to be exactly who she was. And her mom even gave me her phone number and said, she definitely wants to meet up with you again. I mean, she was very open to it. Unfortunately, there's a lot of parents that are not, and they suppress that in children. And again, they call them overly sensitive and tag them with ADHD labels and give them pharmacology or pharmakia, right, as it's known. I never did that. My son is not at all on that plane. So he's just like the polar opposite of that, which was so interesting to see and raise two children on different spectrums. But I never put my daughter on any, and this is, again, I'm not giving any medical advice, of course, but for me personally, I never chose to give my daughter any medications or anything to suppress. I just worked with her individually. I had an extreme amount of patience, which you need. An empath, a child who's an empath and is on the ADHD spectrum, you really need to have a lot of patience with them. Sit with them quietly. Only use, like I used to use, very short periods of time to work with her, because they're not good with. You can't sit them down and say for a half hour you have to study. No, it would be 5-minute blocks, like we would tackle, because that's what she was able to withstand. And I did her homework that way. So if your child's that way, just what worked for me might work for you. Just be extra patient, work in small blocks of time. Again, I tried to give her as least amount of sugar as possible, because that always had an adverse reaction on her. Everything, less carbs even. I used to watch her, and if she ate too many carbs, I would notice a change. You got to really be observant when your child's like that.
So I wanted to, we have about 15 minutes left, and I kind of want to talk about your show. You have a show right here on United Public Radio, Ethereal Encounters Unveiled.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about your show and where people can, well, most of the people here know where to find it, but where can people find you?
It, guys. I appreciate it. You can find me on YouTube as well, which I appreciate. The subscribe, Ethereal Encounters Unveiled. You can just go to YouTube and search for it. I got started years ago interviewing authors, because I love to read, and I would get in touch with them, and I would love to interview them. And then I met Preston and Dolly, and I interviewed them, and then they introduced me to the network through Michelle. And it's been such a blessing. I've met so many wonderful people, so many awesome people in the chat that pop in, and so many listeners. And I love diverse topics, even if it's something I don't believe in personally or ascribe to. I still love to ask the questions. It's all about the guest, asking the questions, digging in, getting questions in the chat. Loved those too. So I'm very open to all different topics and categories.
Got it. And when is it? When does it come on?
Well, it used to be 2 days a week, and it went to 3 days a week, which is crazy. Wednesdays, sometimes I do replays. It depends. But Wednesday at 4:10, Thursday at 5 p.m., and this is all Eastern Standard, and Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard.
So some of the guests on the radio here have a few comments. Hillbilly Herb, which I love the name.
I know everything. It's great.
He says, I believe I encountered spirits or fae in the woods, and they all seem part and parcel with Sasquatch. Do you have any experiences with that?
I have heard that there are ET connections just to Sasquatch sightings as well. So there's a theory that they are interdimensional creatures, and they could pop in and out of timelines. So that doesn't surprise me, Hillbilly. I think it's spot on. Yeah.
Do you think that the fae, is that just another aspect of the paranormal that kind of changes they're trying to get your attention to have you look at something else to see a bigger picture of some sort?
I think so, CL, And I think it's all a matter of what you can tap into. You know, it just depends on the individual. Some people can tap into spirit more readily. Someone I interviewed can tap very easily into the Fae. And I really think it just depends on how thin the veil is for you in these dimensions. I really do.
So back to where we were talking about the whole COVID thing, have you noticed the influx of all the people who are learning this stuff and coming out with all the different abilities? Does it seem like we have more people that are being blessed with these gifts for a reason on planet Earth? Or do you think it's just because that door's been open?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've definitely noticed it since then, the past 5 years. People are changing the way they see the world, and they're allowing themselves to look more deeply into their own reason for existence. They're opening their minds, hearts, and souls to things that maybe they would have never thought of before. And it can be a very scary, lonely place when you start to awaken, so to speak. And especially if members of your family or friends are not on that same plateau. Best advice I could give is just don't stop. Just keep digging, because you're put on this path for a reason. And that reason is for your soul's awakening. And it's a beautiful thing, even though it's scary at times and lonely at times.
Well, what does a spiritual awakening mean? I know it can be different for everybody, really, but
yeah, that's a great question. I don't think it's just about awareness either, but it's the field through which reality is filtered. So what we notice, what we ignore, what we fear or value actively shapes the world we think that we live in, right? And I think that when you allow yourself to bend your perceptions and alter them, that you can begin to have this spiritual awakening, this perceptual expansion, rather than just a belief adoption. So like in the past, we would just believe whatever we're told. Now folks are expanding their perception. And unfortunately, like I said, sometimes it can be scary because awakening destabilizes identity. And then the ego starts to lose grip, right? Awareness becomes like less localized, right? You have heightened sensitivity. Your nervous system, there are biological shifts that take place as well. So like this, we could have a whole show just on that topic alone.
we could, yeah.
So much that goes into it. But it's a wonderful experience. It's a joyous experience. It's someone mentioned soul contract in the chat, and I really believe that that's part of our soul contract in this incarnation, if it's meant to be.
What if it's all of humanity kind of becoming more of a conscious, like a collective conscious unit to kind of evolve in some way?
I think you're spot on. And I think, again, everybody just has a different time frame for that to happen. And more people are waking up. Do you remember, like, well, no, you're too young. But back in the 80s, there was this new agey kind of awakening that happened. If folks in the chat might remember, like The Secret came out, I think it was the 90s or the 2000s. And there's always been decades of awakening. They just happen and people don't remember them all the time. But if you think back, like every decade, there seems to be an awakening, and we seem to just be, like you said, globally moving closer to it. And I think you're spot on. I think that's exactly what's happening. I mean, I believe.
I think you're right, because it's like the star seeds too, where they're grouped. So you had a big wave of them in the 60s that came out. In the
Yes.
70s, you had another wave. They had an 80s group,
Yeah.
which I believe I'm part of that 80s group that came out. And then they said there's a millennial crowd. They're young yet, but they're supposed to be really, really intuitive and strong.
Oh yeah. They're tapped in big time. And I think you're right. It's just it's a constant evolution. And hopefully, um, you know, we'll be here to see it, to see what it evolves into, because it's definitely a global consciousness and it's a beautiful thing.
When you look at like stuff like UFOs and things like that, is that tied into it? Do you think we're reconnecting to who we used to be? Or
I
are we
don't know.
changing in some, like, because there's a lot more stories, and I've been trying to figure this out too. There's a lot more stories of people coming out saying that they're abductees. And have you had any experiences with UFOs or anything like that?
I have not.
I haven't either.
And I'm kind of intrigued with Chris Bledsoe because he's the orb guy. And I've been doing and interviewing a lot of people about these orbs, and the jury's really out about them, CL. I don't know if they're angelic or demonic, and it's kind of scary to kind of think about that. But you have to realize that, there is light and darkness, right? And darkness is an inversion of everything that's light. And there are trickster spirits out there. So I think when it comes to UFOs, orbs, and that light, I think we need to be very careful about if we're going to try to communicate with them. I mean, and then you got Dolly and Preston, who we all love and know. And I believe that she's her story and that she's a contactee. So it's such a confusing thing to sort, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just all gotten the paranormal has gotten so layered.
Yeah.
I feel like you have, like, it used to all be where everyone was in their little silos, different silos all over the place, but now there's kind of an overlap of everything.
Spot on. And that's what I was talking about with the verbiage too. There's so many, words that it's supposed to describe like the paranormal. And to me, there's so many layers of it that intertwine, and it's very hard to articulate it with just one word or one description.
It has. I do have a story though. When I was a kid of the 80s. So, we had a lot of magical TV at that time. We had a lot of, that's when Disney came out.
Yeah.
The cartoons of Disney and all that. It was just a very magical time to be a kid. When I was real young, though, there was a basketball-sized orb that would kind of bounce around the room.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So when you said orbs, that kind of reminded me of that experience.
How old were you when you saw that?
I was young, probably like 3, 4, 5.
Wow.
In between there.
Yeah. 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 I have video of orbs too that kind of blew me away. I was able to, in my backyard. They're on my YouTube channel. You could go look at them. That freaked me out too. I don't quite know how to make sense of the whole orb thing yet. I believe maybe they're a mix of both angelic and demonic. Or maybe they're just all angelic. I can't quite put my finger on them yet. I'm still working on it though.
It's interesting because I was never afraid of it until much, much later in life. Something happened in Nashville. It was a total different story. But
yeah,
I've never gotten how a lot of people will say when they were kids that when they experienced the paranormal, they were always afraid and that sort of thing. That was not my experience at all.
Yeah.
So,
and then unfortunately, if you have a negative experience like you did, that can kind of shut you down in so many ways that you don't want to have shut down. You know what I mean?
It did for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Carolann, I just thank you so much for coming on the show. I know we're kind of running a little over.
No,
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the
Thank you.
conversation. We kind of went all over the place, but
you did. It was fun. It was definitely fun. Thank you, everyone in the chat. I didn't get a chance to read them all, but thank you all.
there was a lot of talk amongst themselves, I think.
Oh, good. All right.
But yeah, it was a good conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, CL. Take care. Much
Thank
love.
you.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Gateway podcast broadcast from 107.7 FM, New Orleans. And I will see you all next week again at this time. Don't forget, stay on the line because there's another great show coming right up after my show. Thank you all for listening.